A lot of us on this path, we're trying to get rid of the ego. We have this belief that there's this sense of self that we have to get rid of so we can achieve no self. And this is at its core a misunderstanding, because what our mind's done is we've created this solid entity called me, a self, and this entity that is just ultimately a belief. We now have to get rid of this self through inquiry, through path. And this is, it's not usually taught this way, but it is just an assumption. You know, we hear no self, or, you know, we have to see beyond the self, and we go, okay, so there's a self here and I have to get rid of it. And then when I get rid of it, I'll be liberated and I will awaken to my true nature. But I'm going to share with you a view that is actually going to help us to, I guess, see through the self, but not get rid of it. Because there's always going to be a function, but the perspective on the self is the insight into it. It's a shift in perspective of a different view on identity. So one, we create there's a self that's believed in, a me, and that's who we believe us to be. And when we, inquire into who we are, we have all these beliefs and thoughts about ourselves, and all these beliefs and thoughts, they create a self. Or we think that there's, we got seeing, hearing, thoughts, sensations, concepts, and all of these things coming together, the center of my hand, we put self, the self, and that is the receiver of, you could say, all these perceptions, thoughts, and there's this thing in the middle, and that's who we are. But this apparent self that we believe in, and all these, what the insight is this is actually a verb. This is not a noun. There isn't a self there receiving reality. It is a false assumption made on all this reality. It's like our mind fills in the gap of no self and assumes there to be a self. And when you look at it that way, you're trying to get rid of something that isn't there, that's just a losing game. Believing there's something there and belief that you have to get rid of it's a losing game, because it's not there anyway. There's nothing to get rid of. There's no you there. You are only, and you could say, a verb, an action, and a sort of appearance. Same with say I talk about a chair. A chair, everything's a verb. Everything's an arising that is actually dependent on many facets coming together. Dependent on like with a chair, all the timber being built together and shaped a certain way, and the air. Otherwise, it's the timber, and the timber is dependent on the earth, and the chair is dependent on someone sculpting it, and it's like all these conditions coming together temporarily, though. That's why it isn't a solid object. It's temporarily just happening and then not happening anymore. A verb, an action, the self, an action. But what what happens is it's almost like our mind starts to hold on to reality and tries to ground and solidify it, when in its essence it's empty, because of everything is dependently arising and is dependent on each other to exist. You know, you take away one thing and the rest of it it doesn't exist anymore. You take away experience, there's nothing to be conscious of anymore, therefore no consciousness. Consciousness is dependent upon something to be conscious of. And this is, it may not be seen straight away, but this is the sort of a view we can hold when on our path, is just, you know, tapping into that, okay, like this is all arising and passing away. It's not solid. The self isn't solid. It is just something that seems to be assumed from taking in reality, and we just assume there's something there. But when we see that there isn't the self, there's just these things, our experiences, seeing and hearing, sensations, thoughts. They're happening, but they stop happening to the apparent self, which was never there. But they just happen fluidly, because for some reason the self when it's believed, there's an energy there that sort of pushes against reality. It's like it's constantly trying to defend itself, because it's not that it knows, but it's trying to find ground in reality constantly. And sometimes it gets it through certain behaviors, but it's always shaky ground. The affirmation of like, oh, I am someone who, there is a self here and I exist and I have X, Y, Z, and it's the root of suffering, that I am an aware being inside a body that is experiencing reality. Reality just is happening, and that's sort of, to simplify it, everything's just spontaneously happening. But we think that there's someone here who can manage it, who can control it, who it's just it's just this belief in, it's an assumption, and then an assumption in that I exist. And I, not as in this, of course there's a body arising, there's all this arising. You know, I'm not going to say that there's nothing here. There is what's appearing, but at its root, just at the root of reality, there's just no one there. There's no one home. Each thing is happening on its own accord, and there's not somebody in the middle managing reality. These are just happenings, thoughts, feelings, sensations. And when there is a belief, you know, it sort of changes these. We start, the body and things start happening in a strange way to protect this sense of self that feels separate. So this is, I guess, my advice when on the path, because we get stuck trying to get rid of something that doesn't exist. It's a never-ending circle. And upon hearing this, you know, I don't recommend not doing anything. We move from this, from a balanced view, if this isn't seen, we practice. We call it practice enlightenment, where we practice with understanding that there isn't a thing there, but there's still fixations and beliefs within our body, within the apparent body, that may disagree with this, which ultimately isn't wrong, but ultimately a more embodied approach is not just holding on to the belief that there is no self or even having an experience, but embodying that experience entirely throughout your being, in every facet of your experience. Because there will be parts of you that won't ultimately agree with this experience of no self, and you'll know by the way you react in certain situations. You still get triggered, you still have emotional issues, you still don't treat people well. These are all symptoms of parts that insight hasn't reached. And yes, always on the ultimate sort of perspective, it is all okay and all accepted, and that's the foundation of practice enlightenment, is everything is okay and everything is accepted. It's the absolute. But then we've got the relative, where we understand there's always attunement, refinement, embodiment that can happen. At the same time, everything is absolutely okay. At the same time, practice enlightenment, emptiness embodied. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one.